So the world wasn't here when you were sleeping last night. The world comes out of you when your body-mind becomes conscious. The world's projected through your mind. That's just an opposing paradigm. Neither one of those is full truth. So that's another thing. It's important. So like some people will try to meld Rose's teaching and Harding's teaching, but they're actually working from two different paradigms. So it's like the Necker cubes that you see the pictures of. If you look at them, they switch inside, outside, inside, outside. It's like that. And so it's important to try to keep track of which paradigm you're working in and drawing conclusions in and stuff like that. Because any relative truth has an opposite that's equally valid.
Is it naive then to say that the real you, not that this real you is to make it aware of itself? Is that kind of a slightly sentimental thing to say, or is it, this idea of an accident that actually, it doesn't really care, I mean, it doesn't make any difference, but you have this opportunity almost to go against this whole kind of kaleidoscope that's produced to be aware.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a kind of sentimental idea? But
it's okay.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah. The mind wants an explanation for it. Yeah. There is many explanations. So explanations. Explanations are part of the mind's activity.
Right.
That knowing drive.
Mm-hmm.
It's the knowing drive to want to know.
Yeah.
Always wanting to know.
Yeah. That's why some people refer to it as the unknown. I think that's a good description because it's out of the realm of knowing. So from there, Gurdjieff called God the #1 idiot, which is pretty good. Yeah, there's no because, there's no whys and wherefores where you are. So when you're conscious, when the mind is conscious of what you really are, I wouldn't even know how to go about trying to describe the whole mess. But when you're back there, let's say. I had the feeling that I was looking at my belly with my eyes closed. I didn't have a belly, but I was looking in the direction of my belly with my eyes closed and seeing the cosmos projected. And back there you don't have any there. Oh, I'm doing this because I want some entertainment. There's nothing there, but nothing there is also everything. And so the people who come into self-realization through the cosmic consciousness route, they get the one with everythingness first. I got the one with nothingness first, and the one with everythingness was sort of like a secondary realization when I was back there. But yeah, so that the mind can puzzle on that for a few thousand years and won't come up with an adequate explanation. But it'll relieve your mind, I'll tell you that. It doesn't. I always used to say it won't make potentates out of pumpkins. So you're still seeing a pumpkin here. So this is basically a robot making noise, another robot hearing the noise. So that's about enough. Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this thing about dualism and the relative and the mind and intuition and you talked about surrendering, but you also have shock, and a shock it kind of can break you out of those structures because the mind have its own way of controlling and perceiving and understanding and limit itself. And the intuition, I tried to read Jacob's ladder, but I don't understand it.
It's complex.
It's very complex.
Dense. There's a lot there. So it's dense.
Yeah. But this thing about transcending, and you're striving from your own point of reference, wherever that is. From my experience, I see that shock can somehow make things up, that you have to shift. You have to shift.
I think it's definitely, it feels accidental. In some cases, it may be shocking. In other cases, so like when intuition hits me, I feel that there are two different modes. One mode is when just out of the blue something hits. And so that would be more like a shock in a way if it were traumatic. And then the other way is that just, I don't know where the dividing line was, but all of a sudden it's intuitively obvious that X. You know, so that's more the erosion kind of thing. And I've seen that process maybe twice. I've watched what I think is the intuition process at work, and the mind would be processing, like the last time it occurred was just a couple months ago. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I watched my mind processing an enormous load of data, like a whole year's worth of data about the topic. I knew the topic it was working on. There was so much stuff going so fast that I only caught little bits and pieces of it. And it was 7 hours later when the processing stopped and the mind had reached a conclusion. And so I'm suspicious that that is going on frequently, and we're just not tuned into it. So I think that's now I think that's not the only way that intuition works. I think that's the way it works on processing great amounts of data. I think there's also intuition that works by picking up things from, you know, whatever might like be overmind, you could say. Like how the geese, when one goose learns how to pop popcorn, all of them know all over the world, you know. Kind of thing, the species morphogenesis or whatever Rupert Sheldrake called it.
Okay. Does it helps to believe, although it's also something that you also probably have to overcome, that you'll have some kind of help along the way?
Yeah, I think faith is very important. There's a difference between faith and belief. Are you familiar with who Bernadette Roberts is?
Yes.
Yeah, she points it out in one of her writings. I don't know if it's any of the books or not, but yeah, belief is often a sticking point, but faith that there's what Rose said one time, and I did when he said it, I wasn't there, but I saw it. It's in the Mr. Rose video. And it dawned on me that something that had occurred to me years earlier was exactly what he was talking about. And he says that you need to find the umbilical cord that connects you to your source.
I think you mentioned it also in your books.
Did I? Yeah. Yeah. So to me, that's the same as finding faith. There's faith in something bigger, you could say. It turns out that we're that, you know. And Rose also said, if you pray deeply enough, you will hear and respond. So that's another way of trying to get some feeling for that same thing.
Is that the yearning you were talking about?
Yeah.
Is it waking up and
The yearning, I think, is that, so like in Jacob's ladder, he's coming down the other side of the triangle. There's a dotted line that he calls the invisible current. Mm. And that's, so I've seen some of this in like slow motion one time. And it's, there's something, what I saw was there 2 pipes that percepts are hitting the mind through, percepts are coming through 2 different pipes. One is, I could identify it was all sensory experience. So sights, feelings, things like that. The other pipe, which was just other, is what I'm convinced is that where we're attached, the mind is attached back to its source. That every percept that hits the mind that isn't first projected out here and then hits one of the senses, you know, is coming from our source.
Is that also love?
We feel that vibration. The vibration is, I think, the basic form of it is what we feel is like nostalgic. You know, the call home.
Yeah.
Yeah, the longing, the yearning. Mm-hmm. Yeah, love is a.
This feeling.
I don't know.
You know, you were talking about the feeling that was here.
Yeah. Well, some people feel warmth in the chest. They equate that with love. To me, love. There's so many different forms of love. I have to try to figure out which ones we're going to talk about. You know, but Sean, our buddy Sean Evans, said, "I'm the last one you would ever expect to say this, but yes, our source is love." So that's as good a way to say it as anything. But the mind can't conceive of what unconditional love is.
Right.
So it's closer to high indifference. movement is to preference real unconditional love.
Right.
And so everybody says this is a terrible universe. Look at all the wars and the people being mean to each other and stuff like that. It's terrible. It must be a sadistic guy who's created this. But when you know what you are, you realize, and you can even see it from the edge of the mind that everything's perfect, just down here, just the way it is. Yeah. So unconditional love is unconditional love being manifested in a dimension that is not unconditional. But the love we feel like for a child, that's to me that's the higher part of the heart opening up.
Right.
And momentarily the ego's out of the spotlight. Yeah, so all those things are tastes of the. In fact, Rose said a person who can love is more likely to be able to find the truth about himself. She also said that you can't love unless you can hate.
He seemed like he was very fair about the opposites. There's quite a trend, I think, for everything to be heartfelt
Yeah.
or thought correctly about, as opposed to just breaking it all.
Yeah, he and Bernadette Roberts, I wouldn't know how to classify them because they both are very intuitive but have really strong intellects, really strong conceptual processes. And Rose worked differently with male and female students generally. He felt every male needed to become a fighter. And basically the female path was more likely to be one of surrender. So it was more of a bhakti path for females. So that's racist, right? Or sexist, that's sexist. Franklin Merrill Wolff, it was a few years ago, I went to one of their get-togethers. He died in the
80s.
Yeah. But his granddaughter is trying to carry things on, and they had a get-together. They hadn't been together for a few years, and fights over the property and stuff like that. And some of his old-time students came back that year that I happened to be out there. And one of them was a woman who had been a hippie up in San Francisco at the time when, what's-his-face, the guy with the dolphins and the submersion tanks, Lilly? Was it Lilly? Merrill Wolff had been somewhat known before that. He published a book and stuff like that, but he'd gone out of public view, and this, I forget what his first name, wasn't Richard, was it? John Lilly, yeah, had popularized Merrill Wolff again, and so she decided to go down to, he was in Lone Pine, which is on the other side of the Sierra Nevadas, yeah. She'd gone down to his, he had a big ranch there, it was basically going back up against the hills, and she was going to spend some time there, so she drove her VW bus down, parked in the desert for a while, and then finally moved to the ashram. She said one time I went in and talked to Merrill Wolff. He was always happy to talk to students personally, one-on-one. And she said, "Oh, I've been reading the Upanishads, and I'd like to study the Upanishads." And he said, "Well, I think it would be better for you to wait until you come in a male incarnation." And she said she was burning mad for 2 days. So these generalizations about male and female minds and stuff like that, they're obviously, they're overgeneralizations. But so Rose would males, he didn't want to coddle. He didn't want him leaning on him. He sort of kept him at arm's length. And the women, he'd work with one-on-one, seemingly more sympathetic toward the women. I remember one time when I was living on the farm, I was tied up in knots, but I had been for years, so that wasn't anything. But I was sitting on the kitchen steps. It was during warm months, and sitting on the steps, going out of the kitchen, off the kitchen porch, and he came out the kitchen and came down the steps, and I said, "Mr. Rose, I'm just tied up in knots." And he turned around and said, "Yeah, I know you are." And he turned around and kept on walking.
Row your own boat.
Yeah. So let's take a break. In fact, it's getting sort of close to noon, isn't it? What I have in mind is going to take about 30 minutes. Do you want to try to put that in tomorrow's schedule or something? What do you think, Chris?
I have no idea.